Much has been written of what a lousy writer Rian Johnson is. The script for The Last Jedi is a patchwork quilt of disappointment and suck. Little pieces of Star Wars cut out of the fabric of canon and stitched together out of context or any sane order, resulting in a Frankensteinian fractal of fucked. A Dear John letter to the fandom where we were all informed, after 40 years of loving devotion, that Star Wars was breaking up with us. When Luke threw that lightsaber away like it was a piece of junk mail advertising Jabba's used car emporium, our prices are out of this world. Those of us with brains in our heads knew that Luke would never do that. Knew that whatever the fuck this thing was that we were watching, it wasn't Star Wars and probably never would be again. Mark Hamill certainly knew it, even while he was shooting The Last Jedi, and there was footage of Mark after a take on the set, hanging his head in tears at what he's being forced to do. And thus we see that in addition to being the worst Star Wars writer in the history of the franchise, even including Jake Kasdan, who simultaneously wrote the script for Solo and found a cure for insomnia, Rian Johnson is a terrible director. In the years since The Last Jedi's release, we've seen what a douchebag Rian Johnson really is. He insults fans on Twitter, delights in circumventing the hopes and dreams of longtime Star Wars devotees, and famously revealed himself to be a troll of the First Order to his core by expressing his intention all along was to make movies that half the audience hates. Well done, Rian. Mission accomplished. Though I think at this point it's fair to say that more than half the audience hates what you've done, but that's beside the point. The director of a film is the leader on the set. The director sets the tone for the production, not only visually but in actual physical terms during filming. A good director is sensitive to what's going on in terms of morale, knows how to work with actors to arrive at the truth of the scenes being filmed, creates an atmosphere of camaraderie and mutual support on the set so that everyone is working with maximum efficiency in reasonably high spirits. The fact is, when you've got actors crying on the set because of what you're making them do, that would tell a good director that something is wrong. Now, it's okay after an emotional scene for tears to spill out after a take that's been emotional, but this was not the case on The Last Jedi. When I saw Luke hanging his head, unable to go on after a take, and I saw people ignoring him as the production continued, and then I finally saw Rian Johnson come over and kind of pat him on the back, not with concern, but a kind of grinning embarrassment like, oh geez, here goes Mark being difficult again. And then walk away, leaving Mark Hamill on his knees crying. I knew in that moment that Johnson was a prick. How any decent director could allow an actor to just kneel there, crying in the open, vulnerable and miserable, and just walk away, not lead him aside away from being the center of attention, not talk to him and try to figure out what's wrong, what can be done to fix it, is an indictment of Rian Johnson not merely as a director but as a human being. And so we come to the tears of Admiral Ackbar. Tim Rose, the actor who played Admiral Ackbar in Return of the Jedi and The Last Jedi, recently revealed that he too was reduced to tears on the set of The Last Jedi due to Rian Johnson's insensitivity and boorish disregard for the legacy of Star Wars. Fans of the original trilogy were horrified during The Last Jedi to see Admiral Ackbar die the death of an extra, going out like a punk off screen without so much as a tear shed by any of the characters in the movie, without a brief eulogy, without any acknowledgement whatsoever. This was emblematic of how Rian Johnson saw the legacy of Star Wars, its entire rich history and its fandom, to be discarded like so much used toilet paper. Admiral Ackbar? Who cares about him? He was a minor character to Rian Johnson. No one is going to care about his death, right? Rian Johnson only put Admiral Ackbar in The Last Jedi for his nostalgia value as a prop, a piece of furniture, just like every droid and ship design from the original included in this massacre. Ackbar to Johnson Wasn't a living, breathing character much beloved by fans. He was a goddamn piece of set design, inserted to trick fans into believing that this charade he was filming was actually Star Wars, by cloaking it in Star Wars imagery, while simultaneously leaving out Star Wars' soul. But too many of the actors, human beings who have cared about Star Wars for most of their lives, they weren't in on Ruin's gag. They still cared. They still showed up after all these years, ready to put their hearts and souls into The Last Jedi, only to be told that, like prostitutes, their souls were not required. Rian Johnson just needed their bodies for a little while, so turn your trick, obey the perverted wishes of your John, and then shut the fuck up and get out. Your money's on the dresser. But the talented artists who showed up with love in their hearts, not of money, but of Star Wars, couldn't kill their feelings with as much cold dispassion as Rian Johnson killed the past. And so, there were tears. But even after making them cry with his abuse of Star Wars, Rian Johnson had to finally add insult to injury in the case of poor Tim Rose. During production, Tim would show up to work every day with hope in his heart that Admiral Ackbar would be given something, anything, to do. Actors were not given the whole script, only pages relevant to their roles, only what was needed for filming that day. On his last day of shooting, Tim was given his death scene, and it was appalling. A tragically mundane farewell to a legacy character who dies off camera, like an extra, a background character in a Godzilla movie crushed by falling masonry. Tim had already been treated shabbily by Jar Jar Abrams, who had filmed Ackbar for The Force Awakens, then left his scenes on the cutting room floor because, I guess, he needed more time for BB-8, or Finn, or Poe, or the amazing Wonder Ray, or any of the other characters that no one in his right mind gives two shits about. The tiny toons of Star Wars so worthless that the producers had to belittle the original characters to make these new characters shine by comparison. Tim Rose had already suffered that indignity, but this was too much. Because you see, Tim Rose is a human being. Tim Rose has loved his small corner of the Star Wars universe for all these decades. It was a big deal to him, just as Ackbar has always been a big deal to fans, no matter how much screen time he got. But you see, the incompetent, soulless marketeers in charge of Star Wars these days are not fans. Not a damn one of them. They don't see Star Wars as a cultural milestone that has touched millions of lives and shaped countless human beings into the men and women they are today. They see a cow shackled in a pen to be milked and eventually slaughtered when that milk runs dry. There was no love for Star Wars on the set of The Last Jedi, save in the hearts of those who were crying. Tim Rose was deeply wounded to see how Ackbar was killed without a second thought. But then Rian Johnson added insult to injury at the end of the day. Here is a quote from Tim Rose in an interview he gave to Damie Stangroom. And I quote, "We finished all of our bits and they asked me to come down to camera. And I thought, oh well, maybe they're going to say thank you for being one of the heritage characters and giving 30 years and all that. But what they did was, they gave me a Millennium Falcon sign that had the day and the date on it, the scene number, and they said, can you look at the camera and say, it's a wrap? Because that would be really funny. I was actually in tears in the suit, because I thought, after everything, after hoping there'd be something, after knowing there wasn't going to be anything else, Ackbar's moment before he went into the box was a big joke about, it's a wrap. And they just thought, wouldn't it be funny? And that was the sum total of my life as Ackbar. And Tim Rose then confessed that he broke down after that callous insult and revealed he couldn't come out of the backstage area for 30 minutes. 30 minutes, crying, alone. And no one helped him. No one noticed. That's the kind of set Rian Johnson was running. I have no idea if Rian Johnson knew about this or not at the time. I know he left Mark Hamill on the floor in tears in front of the whole crew. So I have to conclude that if he had known about Tim Rose crying, it wouldn't have meant a damn thing to him. If anything, I'm guessing Rian Johnson would have rolled his eyes and said, "Oh, what a baby, actors are such children." Or he might even have smirked, just like he has smirked at all of the pain we've expressed about The Last Jedi, delighting in the taste of fanboy tears. Maybe he would have drunk as deeply of Tim Rose's tears as he did ours. I wouldn't put anything past him. We can't know what it was like to be Tim Rose, humiliated behind the scenes of The Last Jedi. But we know what it was like to sit in that theater and watch our beloved Star Wars tortured to death in front of our eyes. In a very real way, the tears of Admiral Ackbar are our tears. And that is why we must never forget what has been done to us. And that is why we must say 9 to 9. From the center of the earth, this is Dictor Van Doomcock bidding you all, my friends, stay angry and spare a thought for our fallen brother. Spare a thought for Admiral Ackbar and Tim Rose. Ha 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 ha